welcome to a special edition of Movie Monologues here on the Talking About Stuff channel. I'm your host, The Stuff, and this is a special edition because this is the first episode in my Prepare for War series, where I take you on the road to Captain America Civil War, catching you up on all you need to know as far as movies from the Marvel Universe that tie in with it, and just things from the comic universe as well. This first episode is about Iron Man, directed by Jon Favreau and stars Robert Downey Jr., Gwyneth Paltrow, Terrence Howard, and Jeff Bridges. It is the origin story of Iron Man and also the origin story of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This movie came out back in 2008. And it was the first movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This was the movie that kick-started off all of the Marvel movies that you know and love today. And we wouldn't have Captain America Civil War if it wasn't for the success of Iron Man. So this movie follows the story of Tony Stark, who is a billionaire playboy philanthropist, and he makes his fortune by developing weapons for the US government. After being captured by terrorists who want him to make weapons for them, he improves the armor and sets upon himself a mission to destroy his weapons that have already fallen into terrorist hands, and to find out who it is that's selling these weapons to the terrorists. Now, this movie is one of my favorite movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's definitely up there in the top 5. I remember seeing this movie in the theater and it blew me away. This was a Marvel character that I didn't know a whole lot about. My Marvel journey started off with Spider-Man. It actually started in Civil War. So the portrayal of Tony Stark in Civil War and everything that happened in that storyline and in the Spider-Man story arc with that storyline, that was my perception of Iron Man and Tony Stark. It's not the best, but that's just kind of how his character is in that story. So seeing this movie was a completely new and different take on him. And this movie was just phenomenal. Rewatching this movie a couple days ago so I could do this, I picked up a lot of things that I didn't quite notice all of the previous times that I've seen this movie. And the first thing I want to talk about is that this movie, after watching it recently, now for me, it definitely has like an indie feel to it. It doesn't feel like your typical superhero blockbuster film. It's more centered, it's more focused, it's smaller scaled. I mean, Tony Stark himself, we barely see him in the Iron Man armor. I mean, we see him as he's developing and as he's making this armor, and that whole part of the movie itself felt like an indie movie. It had like a smaller indie feel to it. But there's not a whole lot of rock'em sock'em superhero showdown fights in this movie. You get the cave scene, you get the scene where he's taking on the terrorists, and then you get the battle at the end, and that's about it. For the most part, this is a Tony Stark story and the characters around him. And I really like that about this movie. It's, like I said, it feels a little bit smaller scale. That doesn't have to be this grand, big superhero movie that we're getting nowadays, that we're coming up to in a couple weeks with Captain America Civil War. So I like this more grounded, this smaller feeling movie that this movie has. Now, going back to the cave scene, that is one of my favorite scenes in this movie. Just seeing him develop and make this armor from nothing, from scraps of weapons.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
It's just fantastic. It's phenomenal. In fact, back in high school, we did a spoof of this whole scene of him making the armor and then escaping. I worked at a community pool back in high school, and one day when I was bored at work, I decided to take a bunch of boxes that we had in the basement and make a suit of Iron Man armor
with a box of scraps.
And later that night we filmed a spoof video, and I'll show you a clip here, and you also saw a clip at the very beginning of this video. So here it is, take a look.
Open him up! Open him up! Open him up! Open him up! Open him up!
Oh man, it was a lot of fun making that, and we were in the process of making a sequel to it that just never saw the light of day. It's probably for the best because I think it was like most sequels where it just wasn't as good as the original. There are a couple of like inside jokes in that video, but for the most part, check it out. I'll leave the link in the description below. Give it a watch and let me know what you think. Back to the movie though. Yes, that scene was amazing. I talked about earlier too, that sequence where he's making that armor, he's making the adjustments to it, and he's improving on it. I just really enjoy watching it. Now let's talk about the cast, because this cast in this movie is fantastic. First off, we just gotta start off by stating the already known fact that Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark. He embraces this role. This is him. If you look at Robert Downey Jr.'s track record and his whole discography, this role right here is his defining role. I mean, you look at Robert Downey Jr. and you think Tony Stark instantly. He is the character, and the character is him. Now we get into Gwyneth Paltrow, who plays Pepper Potts. She is his secretary? I don't want to say servant, because that sounds really bad, but she kind of is. I mean, Tony Stark even states this in the movie. Without Pepper Potts, like, he's nothing. She is his second half that helps him with just like the common day stuff that we would do. Like, she does his dry cleaning, she pays his bills, she buys his food. There's even one scene where she's like, do you even, like, what's your social security number? And he's like, 5? So without her, he's nothing. He can't go on, and they do a really good job showing that she is the strong woman that's there that helps him, that he essentially can't be who he is without her. And then we get Terrence Howard, who plays James Rhodes, pretty much his only friend. He is a pilot in the U.S. Air Force, and he is part of the Weapons Development Committee, which is how he is affiliated with Tony Stark. Now, Terrence Howard doesn't make it past this movie. Iron Man 2 and 3, Avengers Age of Ultron, and now Captain America Civil War, they recasted Jim Rhodes with Don Cheadle. And it's not my favorite choice. I mean, don't get me wrong, Don Cheadle is a great actor. He does a fine job with the role, but I feel like Terrence Howard captured more of the character in Jim Rhodes than Don Cheadle did. I mean, Terrence Howard, I have more fun watching him as James Rhodes than what I do with Don Cheadle. Now, Don Cheadle does have his comedic moments, and he does have his moments of light character, but he's oftentimes in these movies just very, very serious. He's Tony's voice of reason, and while Terrence Howard had filled that role in Iron Man 1, he was still more of a light-hearted character, a more enjoyable character to watch, and I really enjoyed him in this movie. And finally, we get Jeff Bridges, who plays Obadiah Stane. He is Tony Stark's business partner, and he's also the man who's been selling the weapons under the table to terrorists. After Tony Stark gets out of the cave, he manages to get the scraps of Tony's first armor, and he makes a bigger, better version of it that he plans to make iron or steel soldiers of his own. Probably for the government, but at the same time he's probably going to sell them to terrorists. Because there's a point in the movie where he flat out says to Tony, like, we don't have a job if there's not an enemy. So he feels justified in selling these weapons under the table to terrorists in order to keep his business going, to keep his fame and fortune, and to keep his company going. That's what I really liked about this character, is that yes, he's definitely a bad guy. He's definitely not a good guy at all, and he's out for his own agenda, but at the same time, they do a good job developing his character and showing you his motives. You understand where he's coming from, why he's doing what he's doing. He's not just this villain to be a villain. Now, a lot of people didn't like Obadiah Stane, Jeff Bridges' character in this movie, because he's pretty much just evil version of Tony Stark without the charisma. Well, without as much charisma. Jeff Bridges brings his own charisma. He's his own character, different than Tony Stark. But for the most part, people were just like, well, he's just a bigger version of Iron Man. That's his villain. Well, yes, but there's more to the character than that, which I have just explained. But I feel like Jeff Bridges doesn't get enough credit in this movie. He's more or less viewed as just like a throwaway villain, which, yes, he doesn't make it past this movie, but at the same time, I feel like you're cutting him just a little bit short by saying that. Yes, Marvel has been notorious for having just so-so villains, but I feel like throughout their list of villains that Marvel's had in their cinematic universe so far, he's definitely one of the better ones. He's not the best, but he's one of the better ones, in my opinion. So there you have it. That's my take on Iron Man. And I'm proud to say that Iron Man earns the official seal of awesomeness.
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
And Boxman approved. So there you have it. What is your favorite Iron Man moment? It can be from the movies, it can be from the comic books, it can be from cartoon shows. Mine personally came from this movie.
And 3, 2, 1.
So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like and subscribe. Check out all my other videos as well. This is the first video in the Preparing for War series, so keep an eye out for more in the future. I will be doing more videos in this series on a couple more movies from the Marvel Cinematic Universe leading up to Civil War. Ones that have significance to it or just some importance to this universe as a whole. And I'll also be doing some little comic conversations as well leading up to the movie. So keep an eye out for those. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.